And ladies and gentlemen, Chuck, in a world where selfishness is praised and compassion is dismissed as weakness, what if I told you that real power isn't in how much you take, but in how much you're willing to give when no one's watching? What if the strength this broken world needs isn't louder voices, but softer hearts? Because the most dangerous thing in a selfish world is someone who still chooses to care. Stay with me. This isn't just about kindness. In today's world, compassion is often misunderstood. Many mistake it for softness, weakness, or a lack of backbone. But those who have walked through real storms and still choose to extend grace know this. Compassion is not weakness. It is power under control. It is strength clothed in gentleness, a fire wrapped in tenderness. When you see someone reaching out with compassion in a world that runs on ego, speed, and self-interest, what you're witnessing is courage in action. It takes far more guts to care than to cut someone off. It takes more strength to forgive than to fight. It's easy to protect your own comfort, to scroll past someone else's pain, to turn the volume down when the cries of others get too loud. But it takes inner fortitude to stop, listen, and love. Real power doesn't need to prove itself. Real power serves, and compassion is the evidence that someone has tapped into a strength that doesn't need a spotlight to shine. Think about it. It doesn't take strength to be selfish. That's the default mode. It doesn't take effort to ignore. It doesn't require bravery to avoid someone else's burden. But when a person leans in, when they choose to stay present in another's pain, that's when the real strength shows up. That's not weakness. That's the kind of strength that moves mountains, that changes lives, that writes legacy. And that strength doesn't come from the outside. It comes from the inside. Look at the people who are remembered, the ones who changed the course of history, the ones whose names are spoken with reverence. They weren't just the loudest, richest, or strongest in appearance. They were the ones who poured themselves out, the ones who showed up when it wasn't convenient, the ones who used their position, their pain, and even their brokenness to heal others. That's what compassion does. It doesn't wait for perfect circumstances. It doesn't calculate risk first. It steps in because it knows presence is more powerful than perfection. Compassion has a way of cutting through noise. You can hear 10 voices screaming for attention, but it's the one voice that whispers, "I see you," that silences the rest. It's not flashy. It's not polished, but it's real. And in a world full of filters and facades, real is revolutionary. Compassion says, I don't need you to have it all together. I'm here anyway. That kind of love can't be faked. It costs something. It demands vulnerability. It demands time. It demands attention. And it takes a certain kind of person to give that, not out of overflow, but even when they themselves are running on empty. Here's the truth. Anyone can dominate. Anyone can intimidate, but not everyone can elevate others while lifting the weight of their own struggles. Compassion doesn't mean you're ignoring your pain. It means you're choosing not to be consumed by it. You're using it. You're flipping it. You're redeeming it. And that takes more strength than any aggressive tactic ever could, because compassion isn't reactive. It's intentional. It says, I'm not acting out of impulse. I'm acting out of purpose. There's a reason people are drawn to compassion, not because it's soft, but because it's rare. In a society that teaches you to guard your heart by hardening it, compassion keeps the heart alive. In a culture that tells you to climb over others to get to the top, compassion kneels down and lifts others up. That's not weakness. That's defiance. That's rebellion against a broken system. And it's contagious. When one person dares to love like that, it gives others permission to do the same. Strength isn't just tested in the gym or the boardroom. It's tested in the small moments when you forgive, even though no apology was offered, when you serve with no guarantee of recognition, when you remain kind in the face of cruelty. That is strength under pressure. That is compassion wearing armor. And it's not about being passive. Compassion isn't passive. It's active. It chooses. It shows up. It keeps going, even when it would be easier to quit. It takes strength to be gentle in a harsh world. It takes strength to speak healing into situations that others write off as hopeless. And make no mistake, compassion is not for the faint of heart. It's for those who have been through enough to know what pain feels like and who choose to make sure someone else doesn't suffer alone. It's for those who've been scarred, but refuse to let those scars turn into walls. Instead, they let those scars become windows, ways to connect, ways to empathize, ways to serve. You want to see real strength? Watch someone carry their own grief and still make room for someone else's. Watch someone stand in the gap for a stranger when they themselves are barely standing. That's a level of power the world can't manufacture. That kind of strength doesn't come from self-help books or motivational slogans. It comes from deep within. It comes from a place where identity isn't built on applause, but on purpose, where value isn't measured by what you get, but by what you give. This world may never fully reward compassion, but it will always be changed by it. And the ones who carry it, they're not weak. They're warriors, quiet warriors, maybe invisible heroes, often. But they're the ones holding this fractured world together, one act of love at a time. Compassion is a bold declaration that you will not be conformed to culture around you, that you will not let selfishness win, that you believe in something higher, something deeper. And when compassion flows through someone, it leaves a mark, not just on the one who receives it, but on the one who gives it. Because when you pour compassion into the world, it comes back. Not always in the same way, not always from the same people, but it returns. Not just as favor, but as fulfillment, as peace, as legacy. Because a life rooted in compassion is never wasted. It's never forgotten. It's never defeated. It's the kind of life that echoes far beyond the noise of a selfish world. Selfishness is a silent builder. It constructs invisible walls, barriers that may not be seen, but are deeply felt. These walls isolate hearts, divide communities, and separate people not just from each other, but from purpose. Selfishness tells us to preserve, to protect, to prioritize ourselves at the expense of others. And while it may feel like safety, it's really a prison. A comfortable cell where connection is replaced by competition and love is sacrificed on the altar of ambition. It's a lie packaged as wisdom, a voice whispering, look out for yourself. No one else will. But compassion doesn't play by those rules. Compassion walks right up to those walls and breaks chains. It doesn't need a hammer. It brings presence. It brings truth. It brings healing. Where selfishness says, that's not my problem, compassion says, I'm here. Let's face it together. Compassion doesn't just offer pity from a distance. It walks into the fire, into the mess, into the real and raw places most people avoid. And in doing so, it sets people free. Not only those who receive it, but those who give it. We're taught from a young age to get ahead, to stand out, to make a name for ourselves. But very rarely are we told that the greatest impact we can have isn't in being known, but in knowing others deeply, sincerely, without an agenda. Selfishness measures worth by what you can gain. Compassion measures worth by what you're willing to give. And in that giving, something sacred happens. Chains begin to fall, not always literal chains, but emotional ones, mental ones, invisible ones, chains of shame, chains of fear, chains of loneliness. Compassion is the key that unlocks those locks, not by force, but by understanding. There is a deep hunger in people that goes far beyond physical needs. It's the hunger to be seen, to be valued, to know that even in their lowest moments, they are not alone. Selfishness overlooks that hunger. It walks by the hungry and justifies it with a story. They probably deserve it. It's not my responsibility. I've got enough on my plate. And just like that, the walls go higher, the chains tighten. But when compassion enters the scene, it changes the atmosphere. It doesn't just notice the need, it moves toward it. It doesn't ask what it will cost, it asks what it can heal. Compassion breaks chains by showing up when it's inconvenient, by staying when it's uncomfortable, by choosing presence over performance. It doesn't always come with perfect words or polished plans. Sometimes it comes in silence, a shoulder to lean on, a hand to hold, a listening ear that says you're not forgotten. And that is more powerful than any argument, more freeing than any speech. Because what chains people more than anything is the lie that no one cares, that they're invisible, that their pain is too much. Compassion crushes that lie. Selfishness is rooted in fear. Fear that if I give too much, I'll be left with nothing. Fear that if I care too deeply, I'll get hurt. But compassion is rooted in love, and love casts out fear. Love says, I will not let fear dictate my response. It refuses to let someone else's suffering become just another statistic. It steps in and says, you matter. I see you. I'm with you. And those words, backed by action, can shatter years of emotional bondage in a single moment. There's a reason the most transformational stories in history are not stories of conquest, but stories of compassion. Moments where someone chose to intervene, not for profit, not for recognition, but simply because they couldn't stand by and do nothing. That kind of action creates ripple effects. One act of compassion can lead to another and another until entire communities begin to change. It spreads not by force, but by example. It inspires others to lower their defenses, to open their hearts, to tear down their own walls. Selfishness may offer quick rewards, more time, more money, more comfort, but those rewards don't satisfy. They numb, they distract, they give the illusion of control. But deep down, people are starving for connection. And connection only comes when we stop looking inward and begin reaching outward. That reach may feel risky, it may feel vulnerable, but it is in that very risk that chains begin to break. Think about the person carrying a burden so heavy they can't speak of it. To the world, they look fine, they smile, they show up, they play the part, but inside they're chained by grief, by regret, by hopelessness. Now imagine someone stepping into their life, not with a solution, not with a sermon, but with compassion. Just being there, just listening, just holding space. That moment may not make headlines, but it makes healing possible. It reminds that person, you're not alone in this battle. And sometimes that simple truth is the breakthrough. Selfishness tries to convince us we don't have the time, that we're not equipped, that someone else will do it. But compassion doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It operates in the now. It says, if not me, then who? And in that moment, chains start to tremble. Because when someone chooses to love beyond themselves, to serve without expectation, to step into pain without needing applause, the ATM, Osphere shifts, something breaks. This world is full of people walking around chained by the lies they've been told, by others, by the world, by their own thoughts. Lies that say they're not enough, that no one will ever understand, that their past defines them. Selfishness hears those lies and walks the other way. Compassion hears those lies and speaks louder. It becomes a voice of truth in a world full of noise. It says, you're worth fighting for. You're not defined by what's been done to you. There's still light in you. And that voice matters. It matters more than any degree, more than any title, more than any possession. Because compassion touches the part of us that longs to be free. It doesn't shame. It doesn't judge. It uplifts. It liberates. And liberation doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like tears after silence, like laughter after sorrow, like stillness after storms. These are the signs that chains are breaking. Selfishness may build walls to protect, but compassion builds bridges to heal. One leads to isolation, the other to transformation. And in a world addicted to self, it is compassion that breaks the cycle. Not just once, but again and again. Every time someone chooses to see another's pain and step into it, not run from it, a chain falls. Every time someone extends grace instead of judgment, patience instead of pride, presence instead of distance, another link is shattered. And it's not always easy. Compassion costs. It requires emotional energy, time, sometimes even pain. But the return on that investment is priceless. Because when chains break, destinies shift. When walls fall, relationships begin. And when selfishness dies, love is resurrected. Compassion doesn't just touch lives, it transforms them. And in doing so, it turns ordinary people into agents of extraordinary freedom. Compassion is more than a feeling, it is a force. In a world where selfishness has become strategy and apathy is worn like armor. Compassion threatens the very systems that uphold power without purpose. It is not the soft whisper the world thinks it is. It is a thunderous roar against the idea that people must be used, discarded, or ignored to succeed. Compassion confronts the culture, challenges the norm, and rewrites the rules of engagement. It's not safe, not quiet, and definitely not passive. It is revolutionary, and that's exactly why the world is afraid of it. Society thrives on hierarchy. There are winners and losers, those who make it and those who don't, those who matter and those who are forgotten. That's how the system stays in place, by dividing people into categories, into levels, into worth. But compassion doesn't recognize those categories. It sees humanity where the world sees status. It brings dignity where the world sees inconvenience. That alone is enough to turn heads and shake foundations. Power is often protected by distance, keeping pain at arm's length, keeping discomfort behind closed doors. Compassion defies that logic. It walks into rooms that were never meant for empathy. It speaks in places where silence was the rule. It shows up in prisons of pain, in boardrooms of pride, in alleys of abandonment, and says, this is not okay, and I won't pretend it is. That's disruptive. That's dangerous. Not because it causes harm, but because it heals. And healing dismantles the systems that profit from brokenness. Selfishness is subtle. It wears suits and smiles. It's dressed up in policies and plans that benefit a few at the cost of the many. But compassion exposes it, not by attacking, but by existing. The very presence of compassion makes people uncomfortable because it reveals the gap between what is and what should be, the gap between saying we care and actually caring. And that's why compassion is a threat. It forces people to lie. Oak in the mirror. It forces institutions to face their failures. It forces leaders to answer the question, who are you really serving? When compassion enters the room, excuses evaporate. No more hiding behind systems, numbers, or red tape. Because compassion is personal. It looks people in the eye. It gets down on its knees. It touches the untouchable and embraces the broken. That level of presence, that level of love, that level of truth, it terrifies those who benefit from a disconnected, desensitized world. Because it reminds us of our responsibility. Once you see someone's pain up close, you can't unsee it. Once you hear their story, you can't ignore it. And once you care, you can't go back to indifference. That's the revolution. Compassion isn't just about fixing problems. It's about changing hearts. And that's what makes it unstoppable. You can silence protest, but you can't silence love. You can break movements, but you can't break mercy. You can ignore statistics, but you can't ignore a human being standing in front of you saying, I matter. Compassion puts a face to the forgotten. It puts a name to the neglected. And when that happens, things start to shift. The world would rather people stay numb. Numb people don't challenge systems. Numb people keep their heads down. Numb people follow the script. But compassion wakes people up. It stirs the soul. It lights a fire that says, I'm not okay with this anymore. And when enough people feel that fire, they stop settling. They stop watching from the sidelines. They start stepping into the mess. Not to gain something, but to give something. That's what terrifies a selfish world. The idea that people could live for more than just themselves. Compassion demands action. It doesn't just cry about injustice. It confronts it, not with violence, but with vision. It sees what could be, what should be, and refuses to accept anything less. It builds where others destroy. It heals where others divide. And it sacrifices where others hoard. That's not weakness. That's power redefined. A power that doesn't crush, but it carries. A power that doesn't dominate but delivers. When compassion leads, fear loses its grip, because compassion creates safety, real safety. Not the safety that comes from walls and weapons, but the safety that comes from knowing someone sees you, someone values you, someone will stand with you even when it's inconvenient. That kind of safety can't be legislated, it must be lived. And once people experience it, they hunger for it. They start to ask, why can't it always be like this? And the answer is simple. It can, but only if more people choose courage over comfort, compassion over convenience. Compassion is not afraid to get its hands dirty. It doesn't wait for conditions to be perfect. It shows up in the middle of the storm. It says, I know it's messy, I know it's hard, but I'm here anyway. That willingness to enter into someone's suffering, not as a savior, but as a servant, that's the heart of the revolution. It flips the power dynamic. It levels the playing field. It reminds everyone that worth isn't earned, it's inherent. There's something deeply unsettling to the status quo about someone who chooses love when hate is easier. Someone who listens when shouting would get more attention. Someone who sacrifices gain for the sake of grace. These people are not weak, they are warriors. Silent warriors, steady warriors, but warriors all the same. Their compassion doesn't doesn't just change people, it changes atmospheres. It breaks down prejudice. It dismantles division. It turns strangers into neighbors and adversaries into allies. And this kind of change doesn't need a platform. It doesn't require a title. It starts at the ground level with a heart that refuses to close, a heart that bleeds for more than itself, a heart that sees beyond borders, beyond beliefs, beyond behavior, because compassion isn't about who deserves it, it's about who needs it. And in that simple truth lies a power that systems of selfishness can't compete with, because those systems are built on performance. Compassion is built on presence. Those systems value the strong. Compassion values the wounded. And in the upside down kingdom of compassion, it's the broken who lead the way. You want to change a city? Start with compassion. You want to heal a home? Start with compassion. You want to rebuild a nation? Start with compassion. Not speeches, not slogans, compassion. Because compassion touches what policies can't reach. It moves what money can't buy. And it awakens what time alone cannot heal. It's the spark that starts the fire, the seed that starts the forest, the breath that revives the bones. And once it begins to spread, it doesn't stop. It's not fueled by ego, so it can't be drained by pride. It's not controlled by results, so it keeps going even when nothing seems to change. It's not looking for applause, so it never burns out, waiting for recognition. It moves because it must. It acts because it's needed. It stays because love always stays. And that consistency, day in, day out, moment by moment, is the quiet revolution that terrifies a selfish world. Because when compassion becomes a lifestyle, selfishness has nowhere left to hide. There's a lie that's been sold far too well, a myth dressed up as wisdom, that life is all about getting comfortable, that the goal is to avoid pain, avoid inconvenience, avoid anything that stretches or challenges, that success is a soft couch, a full plate, and a life untouched by the weight of others. But deep down, that comfort, when chased for its own sake, becomes a cage. It might feel safe, but it steals meaning. It might look good from the outside, but it leaves the soul starving. Because the truth is, no one was created just to consume. People were created to carry something bigger, something heavier, something far more powerful. Compassion. It's easy to wrap life around personal needs, to build a schedule around what's convenient, to spend energy only where there's return. But compassion interrupts all that. It steps in and says, there's more to you than this. Not more success, not more stuff, but more purpose, more capacity, more depth. Compassion pulls out what comfort keeps hidden, the strength to show up for someone else even when your own life is chaotic, the resilience to love when it costs, the ability to carry weight that isn't yours simply because someone needs help carrying it. That's not weakness. That's calling. And it's embedded in every human being. Deep in the soul, beyond the distractions, beyond the noise, there's a fire that wants to make a difference. But it's smothered when life is lived only in pursuit of personal peace. The ironic thing is, true peace isn't found in isolation. It's found in purpose. It's found in knowing that your life is about more than just what happens to you. It's about what happens through you. Carrying compassion doesn't always look glamorous. Most of the time, it's quiet. It's behind the scenes. It's showing up when you could walk away. It's noticing what others ignore. It's choosing to care, even when no one is watching, even when no one says thank you. That kind of life doesn't get celebrated in highlight reels, but it shakes the ground in ways no spotlight ever could. There are people right now carrying burdens so heavy they've forgotten what it's like to breathe. People crushed under the weight of grief, rejection, trauma, failure. They don't need a lecture. They don't need a slogan. They need someone to carry compassion to them. Not answers, presence, not perfection, genuine care. And when someone steps into that role, when someone chooses to show up, not because it's easy, but because it's right, something divine happens. Chains loosen, hope returns, light breaks through. Carrying compassion isn't about having all the solutions. It's about being willing to hold space for someone else's struggle, to walk with them through their storm instead of watching from a distance. That kind of presence can't be outsourced. It has to be chosen. It has to be lived. And it costs something. It costs time. It costs energy. It often costs comfort, but it's worth it, because every time compassion is carried, something eternal is planted. A lot of people think their impact will come from their talents, their titles, or their achievements. But legacy is built on love, on compassion, on the moments when someone chooses to give when it's inconvenient, to listen when it's uncomfortable, to stand in the gap when no one else will. Those moments don't always feel powerful in real time, but they echo long after they're gone. It's easy to think I'll carry compassion when life slows down, when I've got more time, when I'm in a better place. But the truth is, compassion isn't a luxury of the rested and rich. It's a call on the ordinary, a call to act now, not later, because people's pain isn't waiting. The needs aren't taking a break, and compassion doesn't need ideal conditions. It just needs willing hearts. That's what sets compassionate people apart. Not their strength, not their resources, but their willingness. Willingness to care, willingness to serve, willingness to be interrupted. The world teaches people to guard their comfort like treasure. But comfort isn't the goal. Impact is. Purpose is. People are. And you can't impact anything you're not willing to step into. Carrying compassion is messy. It will get under your skin. It will break your heart. It will make you question things. But it will also make you more alive than comfort ever could. Because when your life becomes a vessel for healing, for encouragement, for love, you stop living for survival and you start living for significance. That shift changes everything. It changes how you see your time, your resources, your story. You stop asking, what can I get? And start asking, what can I give? The sugar. The amazing thing is, compassion doesn't drain you the way selfishness does. It may feel tiring in the moment, but it fills you with something deeper. Joy. Purpose, connection, because every time you carry compassion, you're reminded that your life matters, not just to you, but to others, that what you do, what you say, and how you show up can actually change the atmosphere around you. And that's the kind of impact that never fades. You don't have to be perfect to carry compassion. You don't need a platform. You don't need permission. You just need to pay attention. Compassion begins with awareness, with the courage to slow down long enough to notice. And once you notice, once you see someone's pain, you can't pretend you didn't. Compassion demands a response, not always a big one. Sometimes it's as simple as a word, a gesture, a presence, but small compassion in the right moment can shift the course of someone's life. It's not about grand gestures. It's about consistency. Day after day, moment after moment, choosing to show up in a way that puts love in motion, choosing to be a safe place in a chaotic world, choosing to give more than you take. When that becomes a habit, life starts to overflow, and that overflow becomes a river of healing that touches people you may never even meet. Carrying compassion doesn't mean you don't take care of yourself. It means you refuse to live only for yourself. It means you see your gifts, your experiences, your story as tools to serve, not just trophies to display. It means you let the lessons from your pain become lifelines for someone else. And that's where true purpose is found. Not in comfort, but in contribution. When compassion becomes a lifestyle, you stop waiting for someone else to make a difference. You become the difference. And the ripple effect of that decision is impossible to measure. One act of compassion leads to another. One life touched becomes two. And eventually, entire communities shift, not because of a policy, but because one person decided to care and never stopped. The world doesn't need more people chasing ease. It needs more people brave enough to carry what matters, brave enough to love when it's unpopular, brave enough to keep showing up when no one claps, brave enough to live a life that gives, not just takes. Because in the end, it won't be the comfort you collected that defines your life. It'll be the compassion you carried